Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm going to do another charcoal drawing, and this time it's going to be a golden retriever puppy. Let me show you how it was done. This one will be a little bit more complicated in terms of the composition than the previous one, because in that drawing of a duckling I had, in the reference I had the full body of a duckling, and here we can't see the full body, so I have to decide how to isolate, or how much of the main subject's body I want to isolate in my drawing, because I want to create another vignette. By the way, the reference will be in the description as usual. So the materials are pretty much the same as the last time. I'm working on a Fabriano sketching paper about 9 × 12 inches in size. I'm going to be using two forms of charcoal pencils and vine charcoal. I switched to a charcoal pencil now, and this is the stick that I'm using here is vine charcoal. So I'm going to use the combination of the two, because vine charcoal doesn't really stick to the surface of the paper, it's usually not as dark as the charcoal pencil, especially when you blend it. You can easily move it around. The charcoal pencil sticks and creates slightly darker marks, stronger textures and things like that, so I want to use the properties of both of them. The initial sketch was done with an HB pencil. So in addition to this, I'm going to use the usual blending and erasing tools, but I'm going to talk about all of this during the drawing process. So like I said, the reference is in the reference photo is in the description. And I want to create another vignette, which means that I will not draw all of the background. I will fade the edges of my drawing to create a vignette. I've already talked about the reason why I prefer vignettes, other than the fact that I don't feel like filling in all of the white space of the paper. I just like the freedom of being able to select which elements I'm going to include, how much of the background I'm going to include, and stuff like that. So this is a cute little subject. I thought that it would be interesting to draw, also an interesting practice, because it's a furry animal and I haven't done that in a while now. I've been experimenting a lot with oil pastels, but every now and then I feel like going back to charcoal, because it is a medium where I have a lot of experience, and I would say I've done most of my drawings in charcoal. Anyway, there's going to be a little bit of shadow here under the paw, so I'm going to draw a little bit of the ground here and just blend that and fade it downwards. As for the ear, I'm drawing the edge, and this line, this crease between the head and the ear is going to appear a little bit darker, but you can see that I'm not drawing it as a single continuous line, but rather as a group of interrupted shapes, darker shapes, so that I would imitate the appearance of fur. And I'm using a sharp medium charcoal pencil for this. I use Master Touch woodless charcoal pencils. These woodless charcoal pencils can be sharpened pretty well, as long as the sharpener is relatively new. And when they get dull, they start breaking even these charcoal pencils. Some brands of charcoal pencils are more difficult to sharpen than others. These are relatively easy to sharpen, which is one of the main reasons why I like them. That's probably my main criterion when it comes to selecting charcoal pencils, so that they don't break much. Anyway, I'm doing the blending here on the ear area. I want to soften it and fluff it up. To further help me with that, I used a little bit of charcoal, a vine charcoal, on top of the marks that I created with a charcoal pencil. That's because vine charcoal is more easily blended, so I can always use it to soften the texture created by charcoal pencil and to create softer, more gradual transitions. I'm going to be doing a lot of work with a brush, and I also use multiple brushes. I use multiple types of brushes and sizes of brushes. Most of the brushes I use are flat brushes though. I'm starting to work on the eyes. The eyes are a very important part of a portrait, not just when it comes to drawing people, but also when drawing animals as well. It's one of the most important, most engaging part of the portrait. And here, for a second, I switched to soft charcoal pencil, and then back to the medium charcoal pencil. The medium charcoal pencil is my main drawing tool with which I do most of the work. The soft charcoal pencil is, as the name says, a little bit softer, but it's also a bit darker. It's the darkest thing that I have. So I tend to use it sparingly for some of the darkest bits, like for example here some of the details on the eye, and I will later use it on the nose and maybe some other areas as well, but mostly on those places. So by using a little bit of that soft charcoal pencil, that gives you a bit of extra range of value, and it makes those darker areas, but also lighter areas as well, stand out because of the range of value, because of the contrast in value. So here I'm just drawing some of that short hair around the eye, and the hair here is a little bit darker, and I have to follow not just the amount of value, but also the length and the direction of the hair. That's one of the things that I always stress when drawing furry animals. If you want the fur to look really realistic, if you want it to look convincing, you have to make sure that you match the length of the fur and the direction in which it flows with the length and the direction of your pencil strokes, or whatever it is that you're using. So if you can't just go and shade everything with broad strokes going side to side, because then it will end up looking ugly. Now naturally, shading large areas and focusing on the larger contrast is important, or it's actually more important if you want to describe the overall shape of whatever, of your main subject or whatever it is that you're drawing. But if you want to also capture the texture and the appearance of the fur, you have to pay attention to these things as well, to the length and the direction of the fur. I'm drawing a little bit more of the ground here, under the head, under the paws, and for that I used a medium charcoal pencil because it's a little bit darker and because it will create a bit more texture. On top of that I used some vine charcoal, and then I blended the two together. That way I was able to create something that has a little bit of an illusion of detail, that's dark enough to look like a shadow area under the dog's body, and I was able to fade the edges of the vignette. I'm starting to work on the nose now. I have to get the shape right so that it would look like an actual dog. And again, for the most part I will use a medium charcoal pencil, but because there are some really dark details here, I will also use a little bit of soft charcoal pencil. The nose itself, it has a little bit of a texture of its own, so I don't want to blend everything too thoroughly. I'm going to use the texture created by the medium charcoal pencil and leave it like that to imitate the appearance of skin on the nose. And now I'm going in with a soft charcoal pencil, making some parts of the nose a little bit darker, like this lower part here, and of course the nostrils, which are larger shadow areas, so those are going to be darker, and the part of the nostril, the part of the skin around the nostril is also dark, but because it's exposed to the light a little bit, I just went over it with a pencil eraser and made it a little bit lighter, and that will also make the nostrils stand out. Anyway, I'm drawing some of the fur above the head. The fur gets longer and fluffier here in the neck and the upper back area, and also around the ears. As always, I'm paying attention to the length of the fur, so the ears themselves are covered with a slightly longer fur. But one of the main reasons why I'm starting with a piece of vine charcoal here rather than a pencil is because I want to be able to blend this softly, and I want to be able to fade it, because that will actually be the top edge of my vignette. I'm not going to be drawing any background there. I'm going to be kind of fading the upper part of my main subject's body there and creating a vignette that way. Sometimes it's just easier to blend when you rotate the drawing a little bit. I should probably talk about that a little bit, because for people who are not recording while drawing, it's going to be a slightly different experience. While I'm recording, I'm using the top-down recording method. I try to minimize the amount of rotating, which sometimes makes it uncomfortable to draw, especially when you're doing portraits and stuff like that, which requires a lot of precision. But there are other subjects as well, obviously, where you would need to rotate a lot, and that's one of the reasons why I always found it more comfortable to draw something when I'm not recording. And I would say that the drawings I do while not recording often end up being more detailed and more accurate also, but not always, obviously. Anyway, I am doing a little bit of work here around the other eye, just drawing some of that darker fur under the eye and in that eyebrow area, and then going in with a soft charcoal pencil to take care of those darker details, like the area just below the upper eyelid and the pupil and things like that. So I'm going to cover everything with a medium charcoal pencil now, and then do some blending. I'm using a Tortillion here. A Tortillion is a great blending tool for cases like these, because it's paper rolled into a fine tip, and it allows you to blend with great precision. As you can see, I left a small catch light there, a small reflection in the eye. That'll make the eye look more lively, more realistic, and also more like a round reflective surface. So now I'm drawing this fur between the eyes. Between the eyes and in the middle of the skull area, there's something like a dip there, and it creates like a parting in the hair, and the fur also gets a little bit longer there. Here around the nose, the fur is rather short. So as you can see, I'm going to be trying to imitate the appearance of the fur by trying to match the length of the fur with the length of my pencil strokes. So where the fur is a little bit longer, like here, I will just use slightly longer pencil strokes. Where the fur gets shorter, I will use shorter pencil strokes. But where the fur gets really, really short, I will just drag my pencil, creating a texture that looks like a bunch of really short hairs. So there are a number of tricks I can use to imitate the appearance of the fur. And of course later I will blend all of that with a brush, creating an even more realistic and softer appearance of that fur, because you can't draw every single hair, and blending helps you create that appearance of volume and density of the hair. In this phase I'm trying to focus on the darker parts of the fur, so there will be some parts of the fur where the fur is simply of darker color, where the fur appears darker because of the folds and creases in the skin and the fur. So you've got to try to capture all of these things. Now another thing that I need to mention, there's also a darker area, a slightly darker hair here above the nose, or below the nose rather. Anyway, I'm blending with a brush and softening everything. But another thing that I forgot to mention was the way that I apply the charcoal pencil. You will notice that I hold it sideways, trying to avoid holding it perpendicular to the paper so that it would be easier for me to blend and erase. Now I'm actually using a Tortillon as a drawing tool. You see, a Tortillon is not merely a blending tool. It picks up a little bit of charcoal and then you can use it to draw. But you may be wondering now, but why would you use a Tortillon to draw when you have a charcoal pencil and vine charcoal? Because with a Tortillon you can create some very faint, light, blurry marks, which in some cases look better than if you were using a charcoal pencil. So sometimes these small variations in the shape and the value of the fur are so small, so light, that you don't want to use a pencil. Sometimes it's just better to use a Tortillon to draw these lighter marks. And that's why I like to use it as a drawing tool. But while I'm using it as a drawing tool, I'm pretty much following the same approach as I am with a pencil, because I'm still trying to follow the direction of the fur and the length of the fur. Just doing a little bit more work, switching back and forth between a brush and a Tortillon to blend everything. But obviously I will be doing a lot more work with a charcoal pencil, and then I will have an opportunity to talk about how I actually apply the charcoal pencil when I draw fur, because how you hold the pencil is pretty important. I'm just doing a little bit of light work here with Tortillon, because the fur is a lot lighter there around the upper jaw area and around the nose area, but you can't make it completely white because it's in the shadow. It's kind of facing down and away from the light source. Now as I'm moving up towards the forehead area, I will use a little bit of this vine charcoal to make the appearance of the fur a little bit fluffier and softer, and also a little bit lighter. So these marks that I'm creating now, they will be blended rather easily, and it'll also be easy for me to make these parts of the puppy's head lighter or darker as needed. So here I switched back to a charcoal pencil because there's a darker area here between the ear and the rest of the head. And you can see how I'm holding the pencil now, trying to create slightly more deliberate marks. And then I'm making a softer transition using a piece of vine charcoal again. In some places I simply put down more of those marks either with a charcoal pencil or with the vine charcoal, and I find that this is a good combination because it helps you use the advantages of both. Just blending, just drawing a little bit more fur with a charcoal pencil now, drawing slightly more deliberate marks to create a bit more texture in places and make it a little bit darker in places. But again, I'm holding the pencil sideways, barely touching or grazing the surface of the paper. That will create marks that are not only lighter but also easier to blend and erase, because when you hold the pencil like this, it makes it easier to connect your pencil strokes and blend them together, and you also don't push the pencil into the grain of the paper, which makes it easier to just remove some of those marks when needed, or do some erasing or do some blending. So it's easier to move the material if you don't hold the pencil perpendicular to the paper and just sort of press down and push the charcoal into the grain of the paper. Just making sure that some of these darker areas around the eyes are of the right value and big enough, because I want to try to capture the appearance of the animal. You know, likeness is not as much of an issue when drawing animal portraits. By the way, this is not a commissioned portrait or anything, this is just something I chose to draw. I picked up one of those reference photos from I think it's either Pixabay or Unsplash, or one of those free image sites. Anyway, what did I want to say? I wanted to talk about likeness when it comes to drawing animals. So the main thing you want to try to do is capture the anatomy of the animal, and these tiny differences or variations from one animal to another, you usually either won't be able to capture those fully, or it won't really matter that much. Maybe if you're doing a commissioned portrait of a specific animal, you have to pay a little bit more attention, be a little bit more careful, because the owner is going to know the shape of their pet's face a little bit better. But honestly, for us humans, it's a little bit harder to differentiate between animals, and we can't really pick up on these tiny differences in anatomy that we can when we're looking at humans. So likeness, I feel, is not as much of an issue when drawing animals, even though you still want to try to capture the overall appearance or the anatomy of the animal. I'm using a pencil eraser now. I sharpened it, and I'm using it to draw some of these whiskers and tiny lighter hairs. And I was actually pretty surprised how well I was able to draw these, like very nice clean edges, I think. That's because the eraser itself was clean, but also because of the way that I applied charcoal underneath. I didn't really press too hard, and I was able to draw some very nice clean marks, which can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. So I created a decent amount of contrast there, and I will continue to work with a pencil eraser now, but I'm here just using it sort of to improve the appearance of the fur here on the paws, and I will do the same thing elsewhere to make the fur look a bit more three-dimensional, to give it a little bit more depth. And here it won't be as important for me to create that much contrast, but I will still want some of these lighter marks to show up. Naturally, the same rules apply. I'm trying to follow the shape and the direction of the fur, even with the strokes of my pencil eraser, because the pencil eraser is very convenient, and you basically use it the same way that you would a pencil, except for the fact that instead of creating darker marks, you're creating lighter marks. This is a Kohinoor pencil eraser. If you don't have this one, there are a bunch of other types of precision erasers that you can use. The most popular one probably is the Tombow Mono Zero eraser. People also use some kind of electric erasers. I don't have one of those. I've never used that. I'm somewhat afraid that it might actually bury the charcoal or graphite into the grain of the paper because it's rotating and pushing it in, so it would actually create marks that would be difficult to erase, but I wouldn't know, honestly, because I've never really tried to work with it. I should probably get one and experiment with it a little bit. I've seen that some people can erase some nice clean marks with it. Anyway, I'm moving on to the other ear and drawing this shadow area between the ear and the leg. And there is some slightly longer fur here, so I'm making my pencil strokes a little bit longer to match the length of the fur. And I will also need to apply some vine charcoal there as well, because I will want to create some softer transitions and make the ear appear a little bit fluffier. I'm trying to make these marks overlap a little bit and trying to vary the direction ever so slightly, because after all, you don't want to make your pencil marks too parallel. It will look artificial, it will look unnatural. So I'm going to need to draw the rest of the body here to the right, and I'm going to want to do most of the work here with a piece of vine charcoal first, because that's the part of the body where I'm going to fade it. I'm going to fade it. That's going to be the edge of my vignette to the right. To the paw area and the leg, I'm going to apply a little bit more of the charcoal pencil. So I'm going to want to create maybe a little bit more texture there, because it's somewhat closer to the focus area, it's closer to our viewpoint, but we'll get to that later. Just trying to define the edge of the ear and some of the darker folds and creases in the ear here and there. So I'm going over some of these lightly blended areas, just adding a few marks either with a charcoal pencil or with a piece of vine charcoal as needed. As always, this video is, as you can see, a combination of real-time and time-lapse. So some of it is maybe a little bit too fast, but if you want to see full-length videos where there is no time-lapse, you should check out my Patreon. Now I have to stress this because Patreon can be a little bit difficult to navigate, in my opinion. On my Patreon there are literally hundreds of videos, and all you have to do is have a little bit of patience and look for the stuff that you find interesting. So if you don't like animals, there are plenty of landscapes, there are even portraits of people, there is some still life, there are many different types of media. I worked in charcoal, graphite, colored pencil, oil pastel, soft pastel. So all you have to do is have a little bit of patience and look through many of my videos that I have there. And if you're having problems finding anything specific, well, you can always contact me and I can help you out. I did the rest of the background here, or the ground here to the right, using mostly vine charcoal. And I soften it with a brush, and I'm going to fade the edges like that. That's going to be the edge of my vignette. And now I'm just going to rework this ear. and add some more detail to the body and the shoulder area to the right. But mostly, I'm mostly going to focus on the ear, because I felt that it needed a little bit more detail, and I also wanted to correct the shape a little bit. I also wanted to make some parts of it a little bit darker so that the ear would stand out better against the rest of the body, I suppose. There are also some small creases here that I'm drawing with a tortillon, or softening some of the existing marks with a tortillon. And here on the top of the head I'm pulling some lighter hairs using a pencil eraser, because the fur needs to be lighter here, but I also want to use these lighter marks as finishing touches. So when you're drawing fur, it feels natural to work from dark to light, because the darker hair and the darker segments of hair or clumps of fur will be underneath. They'll be in the shadow, they'll be further away from the light source. The hair, or the hairs which are sitting on top, will be more exposed to the light source, so they're going to be lighter. So it feels natural to shade the area first, make it a little bit darker, and then draw those highlights or lighter hairs later. That's why you have to be able to erase. And you can also use a kneaded eraser or a kneadable eraser for this. I usually use a Faber-Castell kneadable eraser because they're pretty soft and sticky, and they're also pretty large. So I usually split them into two, and they work pretty well. But the problem with them is that you have to keep reshaping them. You have to keep kneading them in order for them to work. The pencil eraser in that respect is more convenient, but the kneaded eraser also doesn't create residue, so that's one of its advantages. The drawing is pretty much done. I put my signature here on the right side, and I'm just going to do a little bit of cleaning up with a kneaded eraser and maybe put down some finishing touches. Well, this is what it looks like. I hope you enjoyed the drawing process. Don't forget to check out my other videos. I have plenty of stuff on my channel, and also if you want to see longer videos, check out my Patreon. Bye for now.